There are some things you find in old houses that should be left exactly where they are. Not because they're dangerous, not because they're cursed, because time buried them for some reason. My grandmother's house sat at the end of a forgotten road in northern Florida, where the pines pressed close to the edge of the property and the woods swallowed sound. The nearest neighbor lived nearly a mile away. At night, the darkness settled over the land like a heavy blanket, turning familiar things into strange silhouettes. The house itself had always felt older than it was, even as a child. I noticed it. The floorboards sighed beneath your feet. Doors drifted open with no breeze. And every now and then, usually just before dawn, you could hear movement somewhere overhead. Not rats, not squirrels. Something slower, measured. As though someone were pacing back and forth in the attic. My grandmother never seemed to be bothered by it. When I asked her about the sound, she would smile and say the house was settling. But there was always something in her eyes when she said it. Something careful. Like she was choosing her words. 3 months after she passed away, I returned to prepare the house for sale. I wasn't happy about it. The place carried too many memories. Summer afternoons on the porch, thunderstorms rolling in across the trees, the smell of coffee and old books. But keeping the property wasn't practical. The roof needed work, the plumbing needed work, everything needed work. So I packed boxes, sorted papers, filled donation bins, and tried not to think much about the fact that every room felt emptier than the last. The attic was the final task. I saved it for a rainy Thursday afternoon. A mistake, looking back. Storms have a way of making old houses feel alive. The attic ladder groaned beneath the weight as I climbed. A single bulb from the rafters, casting a weak yellow light across decades of forgotten belongings. Dust floated through the air like drifting ash. Trunks and broken furniture. Boxes labeled in handwriting I recognized instantly. Christmas decorations, kitchen, family photos. For nearly an hour, I sorted through the clutter. And then I found the box. It was hidden beneath a faded quilt near the back wall, not tucked away carelessly, hidden. The distinction mattered. Something about it felt deliberate. The box itself wasn't large, maybe 12 inches across. Dark wood, polished, smooth despite its age. Its surface was covered in carving so intricate it seemed almost impossible. At first glance, they resembled vines, then roots, then shadows. The shape twisted across the wooden patterns that refused to stay still in my mind. Whenever I tried to focus on them directly, my eyes slipped away. A strange discomfort settling in my chest. I remember sitting there in the dim light while the rain rattled against the roof, listening, waiting, not sure for what. The attic felt different suddenly, quieter, as though the house itself were paying attention. I laughed nervously and reached for the latch. The metal felt cold, far colder than it should have. When the lid opened, a stale smell drifted out. old paper, dust, something faintly earthy, like damp soil after rain. Inside laid a stack of cards tied together with black string. Beneath them rested a folded sheet of yellow paper. The paper crackled when I unfolded it, and the handwriting was elegant, beautiful even. Yet, there was something hurried about it. The letters leaned too sharply. The ink pressed too deeply into the page, as if whoever wrote it had been running out of time. At the top, there were 6 words: the rules of the game. I almost stopped reading right there. Almost. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. The first rule seemed harmless enough. Gather 4 players. Read every rule aloud. Draw cards in order. Complete each task before continuing. Do not discard any cards. Simple. Almost childish. Then I reached the final instruction. The handwriting changed here. The words appeared darker, more jagged, as though they had been added later. Whatever answers when the game begins must not be left unfinished. I frowned. Answered? What exactly is that supposed to mean? Answer? Thunder rolled overhead, and the attic light flickered. For a moment, I nearly dropped the paper. The bulb steadied again, and silence returned. I told myself it was a storm, nothing more. Yet my gaze kept drifting back to that final line. Whatever answers. Something about those words unsettled me. Not because they sounded threatening, because they sounded certain. As though the writer knew something the reader did not. I spent another hour searching the attic. I found old photographs, receipts, letters, but nothing explaining the box. Nothing mentioning a game. Nothing suggesting why my grandmother had hidden it. Eventually, I carried everything downstairs. The box came with me. That was mistake number 2. That evening, rain continued falling long after sunset. The house creaked around me as I sat at the kitchen table, and the cards rested nearby. I hadn't intended to look at them again. Yet, there they were, waiting. The black string slipped free easily. Too easily. As though someone had untied it only moments earlier. The cards were handmade, heavy paper, faded ink. No illustration. Only instructions. The first card read, "Close your eyes and listen." The second, "Speak a truth you have never spoken aloud." The third, "Stand alone in the darkness for 1 minute." Simple tasks, harmless tasks. At least they appeared harmless. Yet the further I read, the stranger they became. Invite the darkness inside. Answer the voice that calls your name. Do not look behind you. The final card contained only 3 words. The game remembers. I stared at those words for a long time. Something about them felt wrong. Not dramatic, not threatening. Just wrong. Like finding a footprint in fresh concrete. evidence that something impossible had already happened. The storm worsened overnight. Wind rattled the windows, branches scraped along the sidings. Sleep came reluctantly. When it finally arrived, the dreams followed. I was standing in the woods behind the house. The trees stretched impossibly tall around me, their trunks black against the silver sky, and someone stood among them, watching. Too far away to identify, yet somehow familiar. I began walking towards the figure. The distance never changed. Step after step, minute after minute. The figure remained exactly where it was, waiting. Then it raised one arm, slowly, pointing towards something behind me. I turned, and I saw the house. Every single window glowed with a light, including the attic. A shape stood inside the attic window, motionless, watching me. The moment I realized it wasn't human, I woke. My bedroom was dark. The rain tapped softly against the glass, and for several seconds I laid perfectly still, trying to slow my breath, trying to convince myself it was only a dream. Then I heard it. A sound somewhere above me. Slow, measured. A single footstep. Then another, crossing the attic floor. The same sound I remembered from childhood. The same sound my grandmother always dismissed. The footsteps continued nearly for a minute, back and forth, back and forth. Then they stopped directly above my room. Silence followed, a terrible silence. The kind that feels less like an absence of sound and more like a presence of something listening. I stared at the ceiling, waiting, holding my breath. And from somewhere high above, muffled by decades of wood and insulation, came the faintest sound imaginable. A single card being turned over. I didn't go back to sleep after that. The sound of the card turning replayed in my mind for the rest of the night. Perhaps there had been another explanation. An old house settling, a branch striking the roof, a dream lingering after I'd woke. I tried every reason possible, but none of them felt right. By sunrise, exhaustion had settled behind my eyes like a headache. Rain still drifted from low gray clouds as I stood in the kitchen making coffee. The house felt different in daylight. Smaller somehow, less intimidating. That's the trick old houses play on you. The morning convinces you that night was imagining things. I carried my coffee upstairs anyways, just to prove to myself that nothing was there. The attic ladder groaned as I climbed. Dust swirled through thin beams of light, filtering through the vents, and everything appeared exactly as I left it. The trunks, the boxes, the old furniture, the game. The wooden box sat near the center of the floor, waiting. My stomach tightened. The cards were no longer stacked neatly. One card rested beside the pile, face up. I stopped halfway across the room. For several seconds, I simply stared. I knew exactly how I had left them. I remember bringing them together again before bed. I remember placing them inside the box. Now, one card sat alone, separate from the others, almost deliberately. Slowly, I picked it up. The paper felt colder than the surrounding air, and the words written across the surface were simple. The game has begun. I dropped the card. The sound echoed through the attic. Silence followed. And then something creaked overhead. Not from the floor beneath me, above me. As if someone had taken a careful step across the rafters. My pulse hammered. I grabbed the box and hurried downstairs without looking back. I wish I could say that was the moment I threw everything away. Burned it, buried it, anything. Instead, I did what people always do when they're confronted with something they don't understand. I became curious. The internet yielded very little. No reference to a game of shadows, no folklore, no urban legend, nothing. The only useful clue appeared later that afternoon while sorting through one of my grandmother's filing cabinets. Hidden among tax documents and insurance papers was an old photograph. The picture showed 4 young people standing on the porch of the house. The image looked decades old. The color had faded. The edges were cracked. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Then I noticed my grandmother. She stood on the far left. Besides her, there were 3 people I did not recognize. A young man in suspenders, a woman with dark hair, and another man wearing a broad smile. All 4 appeared to be in their 20s, yet none of them looked happy. A smile on the man's face felt forced, and the others appeared tense, uneasy, like people posing beside something dangerous. On the back of the photograph, written in faded ink, were 4 names: Margaret, Daniel, Evelyn, Thomas. Beneath the names was a date, October 17th, 1964. And underneath that, a single sentence: only one finished the game. I stared at those words for a long time. The coffee in my mug went cold, and outside the thunder rumbled across the distant horizon. Only one finished the game. The sentence felt less like a memory and more like a warning. That evening, I called my friend Emma. If anyone could make me feel ridiculous about this whole situation, it was her. Emma possessed the rare ability to walk into a haunted asylum and emerge convinced she found a charming fixer-upper. When I explained everything, the box, the rules, the attic, footsteps, she laughed exactly as I expected. You found a creepy, mysterious game in an attic, and you're calling me instead of making a documentary? I was hoping for a little less enthusiasm, I said back. Not happening, she responded. I could practically hear her grin through the phone, and by the end of the conversation, she convinced me to invite everyone over for the following weekend. Tom agreed immediately. Rachel reluctantly. Neither of them believed anything supernatural was happening. To be fair, neither did I. Not entirely. But something about the photograph continued to bother me. especially the names. That night I couldn't stop thinking about them. Margaret, Daniel, Evelyn, Thomas. Only one finished the game. Around midnight, I found myself searching local archives online. The County History Society had digitalized decades of newspapers. Most were difficult to read, blurry scans, faded prints. Hours passed before I found anything useful. An article appeared in a small local paper from November 1964, headline reading, 3 missing after Halloween gathering. My breath caught. The article described the disappearance of 3 young adults, Daniel Harper, Evelyn Moore, Thomas Whitaker, the same names from the photograph. Authorities believe they had wandered into nearby woods during severe weather. No bodies were ever recovered. The final paragraph mentioned only witnesses. Margaret Ellis. That's it. My grandmother. The article quoted her directly. A single sentence. One I would never forget. We shouldn't have finished the game. I read the line 3 times. Then 4. Then 5. The room felt colder. The house felt quieter. Somewhere beyond the kitchen window, the trees swayed in darkness. I closed the laptop and locked every door. Checked every window. The entire time, one thought refused to leave me. My grandmother had never spoken about these people. Not once. Not in all the years I'd known her. The photograph had been hidden. The box had been hidden. The rules had been hidden. For 60 years. Why? What had frightened her enough to bury the memory? Sleep came late. When it finally arrived, the dream returned. This time, I stood inside the attic. The bulb overhead swung gently. Back and forth. Back and forth. The wooden box rested in the center of the floor. Open. The cards spread around in a perfect circle. Someone stood behind them. Watching. At first, I thought it was my grandmother. The shape had her height, her posture. Then the figure stepped towards me, and I realized this face was completely blank. Not shadowed, missing. A hollow space where the features should have been. The figure pointed towards the cards, and one by one they began turning themselves over. The sound of the paper scratching the wood filled the attic. Card after card. Slowly, patiently, until only one remained. The final card. The figure tilted its head, waiting, expecting. The last card flipped. The words appeared in dark ink. 4 players required. I woke up gasping. The clock beside my bed read 3:17 a.m., and for several seconds, I laid still, listening. The house was quiet. Then a sound came from downstairs. Knock. 3 slow taps against the front door. I froze. Knock. Not loud. Not urgent. Patient. The kind of knock made by someone who knows you'll answer eventually. I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. The road outside was empty. No headlights shone through the curtains. Yet the knocking came again. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Pause. Every instinct told me not to move, so I stayed where I was. The knocking continued nearly for 10 minutes. Never louder. Never faster. Always patient. Eventually it stopped. Silence returned. The kind of silence that feels earned. I remained awake until dawn, when sunlight finally spilled across the window, and I gathered enough courage to investigate. The front porch was empty. No footprints. No tire tracks. Nothing. I was about to go back inside when I noticed something resting beside the welcome mat. A single card, yellowed with age. Its edges damp from the night's rain. My hand shook as I picked it up. There were only 4 words written on it. The others are coming. Beneath the message, written in smaller handwriting I recognized instantly, was my grandmother's name. Margaret. I should have canceled. Looking back, that's the thought that returns to me most often. Not when I think about the attic, not when I think about the cards, not even when I think about what happened afterwards. It's that simple realization. I should have canceled. The card should have been enough. The photograph should have been enough. The article about the disappearances should have been enough. Any reasonable person would have packed the box into the trunk of their car, driven it to the nearest landfill, and forgotten they'd ever found it. Instead, I texted my friends. Still coming Saturday? Emma replied first. Wouldn't miss it. Tom sent a string of ghost emojis, and Rachel simply wrote, "You're paying for pizza." And that was it. The decision was made. Or perhaps it had already been made long before any of us answered. The week passed slowly. The house seemed determined not to let me forget about the game. Every night I heard footsteps in the attic. Never running. Never hurried. Just pacing. Back and forth. Back and forth. Sometimes they stopped directly above my bedroom. Sometimes they wandered to the far end of the house. Once, around 2 a.m, I woke to the sound of laughter. Soft, distant, coming from somewhere overhead. By the time I reached the attic, flashlight in hand and heart hammering against my ribs, the sound had vanished. The attic stood completely empty. The box remained exactly where I left it. Closed, silent, waiting. Friday night brought another storm, the kind Florida specializes in. Heavy rain, constant thunder. The sky flashing white every few minutes. I sat in the living room long after midnight trying to unsuccessfully distract myself with television. Outside, the woods swayed beneath the wind. The trees bent and twisted like dark figures gathering around the house. And every now and then, lightning illuminated them. For a fraction of a second, the entire forest became visible, and then darkness would swallow it again. At 1:12 a.m., the power went out. Television died. Lamps vanished. and the house sank into darkness. I muttered a curse and reached for my phone. The flashlight illuminated the room, and that's when I noticed someone standing outside, across the yard, near the tree line. A figure, motionless, watching the house. My pulse stumbled. I lifted the light higher, but the beam didn't reach far enough. The figure remained hidden in darkness. Another flash of lightning lit the woods and the figure was gone. I told myself I imagined it. A trick of the storm, a branch, a shadow. Yet, I locked every door anyway. Sleep came shortly before dawn, and Saturday arrived gray and humid. The storm had passed, leaving the air heavy with the scent of wet earth and pine needles, and for the first time all week, the house felt normal. Not welcoming, not comforting, just ordinary. And after everything that had happened, ordinary felt wonderful. Emma arrived shortly after noon. She stepped onto the porch carrying enough snacks for a small apocalypse. Her bright smile seemed almost offensive against the atmosphere hanging over the house. "Okay," she announced as she walked inside. "Either this is going to be the greatest night of our lives, or we're all getting murdered." "Comforting," I said back. "I try." She sat her bags down and immediately began exploring. Within 10 minutes, she located the attic ladder. Within 15, she found the box. And with 20, she was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, examining the cards. "They're creepy," she admitted. I blinked. "That's the first skeptical thing I've heard you ever say." "Oh, I still think it's nonsense." She turned one card over. "But it's creepy nonsense," she said. Tom arrived an hour later. His reaction was much the same. Excitement first, nervous laughter second, unease third. Rachel arrived last, and the moment she stepped through the front door, she stopped. Her expression changed. Only slightly, but enough for me to notice. "You okay?" I asked. She glanced towards the staircase. "Do you smell that?" she asked. I frowned. "Smell what?" "Damp earth." The word sent a chill through me because I knew exactly what she meant. It was the same scent that had drifted from the box when I first opened it. The same scent that something lingered near the attic door. Wet soil, old leaves, rain-soaked ground. A smell that belongs outside, not inside a house. "It's probably mold," Tom offered. "Wonderful," Rachel said. "Haunted mold." The joke earned a laugh, but it felt forced. By evening, the clouds gathered again. Not storm clouds, just enough to turn the sky a dull gray. Dinner passed surprisingly normal. Pizza, stories, old memories. For a little while, I almost convinced myself the entire situation was ridiculous. And then the sun began to set, and everything changed. The shift was subtle, almost impossible to pinpoint, but the house simply became quieter. The woods beyond the window darkened. The familiar sound of evening insects seemed strangely absent. Even Emma noticed. "Why is it so quiet?" she asked. Nobody answered, because we'd all been wondering the same thing. Tom finally stood, All right, he clapped his hands together. Either we're playing this spooky attic game or we're not. The room felt silent. My stomach tightened, and for a moment, I considered refusing. Telling them everything. The article, the photograph, the disappearances. But somehow, the words wouldn't come. The game had occupied my thoughts for an entire week, and part of me wanted answers. Part of me wanted proof that it was all nonsense. Mostly, I just wanted it to be over. So I nodded. Let's do it. The attic seemed colder than before. The four of us climbed the ladder carrying flashlights and folding chairs. The single bulb overhead cast weak yellow light across the room. Dust floated through the air, and the box waited in the center of the floor, exactly where I'd left it. Emma sat first. Tom followed, and Rachel reluctantly lowered herself into a chair. I remained standing. Looking down at the box, something deep inside me whispered that I was making a terrible mistake. The feeling grew stronger when I lifted the lid. The cards rested neatly inside, far too neatly, as though someone had arranged them. On top lay a folded sheet of paper. I didn't remember putting it there, and slowly I unfolded it. The handwriting wasn't mine. It wasn't my grandmother's either, but the ink looked fresh. The words had recently been written, very recently, perhaps only hours before. The message contained one single sentence. Thank you for gathering the players. No one spoke. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Tom laughed nervously. Okay, he said. No one joined him. Rachel stared at the paper. That's not funny. I didn't write it. Well, neither did I. Emma's smile had vanished completely. Thunder rumbled somewhere far away, and the attic bulb flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. For the first time since arriving, genuine fear appeared in my friend's eyes, the kind that cannot be laughed away, the kind that arrives when something crosses between strange and impossible. The house groaned, a deep wooden sigh. Then another sound followed, a footstep, directly above us. Every head snapped upward. The ceiling remained empty, silent. Then came a second footstep, and a third. Something was moving overhead, walking slowly across the beams that shouldn't have supported anything at all. Rachel stood immediately. Nope, she said. Nobody argued. I'm officially done. She headed towards the attic ladder and then stopped. Her flashlight beam had landed on the far wall. I followed her gaze. Words covered the wood. Hundreds of words, maybe thousands, written from floor to ceiling in faded black ink. The same sentence repeated over and over again. Some neat, some frantic, some barely legible, all saying the exact same thing. Don't let them finish. The room fell silent. Even the footsteps above us stopped, as though whatever had been pacing overhead was reading the warning too. And for the first time since finding the box, I understood something that made my blood run cold. My grandmother hadn't hidden the game. She had been hiding it from something. Something that was still looking for it. Something that knew exactly where we were. And now, it knew there was 4 of us. For a long time, none of us moved. The warning covered nearly the entire wall. Layer upon layer of desperate handwriting. Years of it, maybe decades. Some lines had faded until they were little more than ghosts of ink. Others appeared fresh enough to have written yesterday. The closer I looked, the worse it became. Different pens, different handwriting, different people, all leaving behind the same message. Don't let them finish. Again and again and again. The attic suddenly felt much smaller. The air heavier, as though the room itself had drawn a slow breath and refused to let it go. Rachel backed towards the ladder. We're done. And no one argued, not even Emma. The excitement she had when she arrived was long gone. What exactly are we looking at? Tom whispered. I didn't answer, because I already knew. Or at least part of me knew. The article. The photograph. The missing friends. My grandmother. The hidden box and the warning. The pieces were beginning to fit together in ways I did not like. A sharp crack echoed through the attic. All 4 of us jumped. The sound had come from a wooden box. The lid slammed shut on its own, hard enough to shake the floor. And silence followed. And then, a soft scraping noise emerged from inside, like paper shifting. Card against card. Slowly, deliberately. The sound continued for several seconds, and then stopped. Emma swallowed. Tell me someone else saw that? I saw it. Tom's voice sounded far away. I definitely saw it. And Rachel didn't say anything. She was staring at the box. Pale. Rigid. The way people stare at a snake they didn't notice until it moved. Then, the attic light flickered. Once. Twice. A third time. And then darkness swallowed the room. Someone gasped. The light bulb returned, only this time something had changed. The box was open again, and one card sat beside it, facing up, waiting. A chill crawled through my chest. No one had touched it. No one had gone near it. Yet there it was, the first card. Drawn, selected, and ready. The realization hit me all at once. We hadn't started the game. The game had started itself. No, Rachel shook her head immediately. Nope, as she headed for the ladder. 3 steps, 4, and then froze. A confused expression crossed her face. She looked downward, and the ladder was gone. Not broken, not fallen, gone. The opening still existed. The drop to the hallway remained visible, but the ladder itself had vanished, as though it had never been there. Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. The silence stretched. Tom finally laughed, a short and nervous sound. Okay, he said. And no one answered. Okay, that's not possible. The ladder wasn't leaning against another wall. It wasn't folded upward. It wasn't hidden. It simply no longer existed. Rachel slowly backed away from the opening. "I don't like this," and the attic groaned softly. The sound seemed almost responsive, as though the house agreed. The car waited beside the box. My eyes kept drifting towards it. The feeling was impossible to explain. Not compulsion, not exactly. More like expectation. The same feeling you get when someone asks a question and waits for an answer. The room felt incomplete, unfinished, until someone acknowledged the card. Eventually, Emma stepped forward. "Maybe we should read it." "No," answered Rachel immediately. "We absolutely should not read it." Emma hesitated and then looked at me. I wish I could say I stopped her. Instead, I nodded, just once, slowly. Emma picked up the card. The moment her fingers touched it, every flashlight in the room switched off simultaneously. Darkness crashed over us. Someone cursed. Tom stumbled into a chair. For 3 terrifying seconds, the attic disappeared entirely. Then the flashlights returned, every beam shining towards Emma, and she stood frozen, reading. "What does it say?" Tom asked. Emma didn't answer. The color had drained from her face. "Emma?" She looked up slowly. Her voice emerged barely above a whisper. "It says," she swallowed, "close your eyes and listen." Silence. Nothing happened. The 4 of us stared at each other, waiting. After nearly 30 seconds, Rachel relaxed. "That's it?" Nobody answered. The card remained in Emma's hand. The words seemed harmless, simple, childish. Then the attic bulb flickered once more. A low creaking sound echoed somewhere deep within the house, and a new line appeared beneath the instruction. The ink spread across the card while we watched, as though invisible pens were writing on it. "The player has 1 minute." Tom took a step backward. "Nope," he said. Another line appeared. "The game is waiting." Emma looked ready to cry. "What happens if I don't do it?" she asked. The card answered immediately. Fresh ink, new words. The rules remain the same. The temperature dropped. Not gradually, but instantly. Every breath became visible. The attic seemed to hold itself perfectly still, waiting, listening. The timer had begun. I don't know how I knew, but I somehow did. The house knew. The game knew. And whatever has been waiting since 1964 knew. Emma closed her eyes. Nothing happened at first. The 4 of us stood motionless, listening to her breathing, listening to the old house settling around us. 30 seconds passed, and then Emma's expression changed. A small frown, then confusion, then fear. Her eyes remained closed. "What do you hear?" I asked softly. She didn't answer. The fear deepened and a tear slipped down her cheek. "Emma?" Her lips parted very slowly. "There are people talking." Nobody moved. The air felt frozen. "What people?" Tom asked. Emma shook her head. "I don't know." Her voice trembled. "They sound far away." Silence. Then, "They're getting closer," she said. My stomach dropped. The attic suddenly seemed impossibly quiet. No wind, no thunder, no creaks, nothing. Just Emma standing in the center of the room with her eyes closed, listening to something only she could hear. A few seconds later, she began shaking. Tiny tremors at first, then worse. "They know our names," Rachel cursed beneath her breath. "They keep saying our names." The bulb overhead dimmed. The shadows along the walls deepened. The corner of the attic seemed darker than they should have been, almost liquid, almost moving. The minute felt endless. Finally, Emma opened her eyes. The moment she did, warmth returned. The bulb brightened. The attic exhaled. The cards changed again. And the original instructions vanished. In their place appeared two new words: task complete. A second card slid from the box on its own, paper scraping wood. The sound seemed deafening. Nobody reached for it. Nobody wanted to. Yet the card slowly rotated, turning, until it faced Rachel. The name appeared across its surface, written in black ink. Rachel. "No," she said. Her voice cracked. "No." The card didn't care. The letters darkened. Waiting. Expecting. The next player had been chosen. And somewhere above us, above the attic, above the rafters, somewhere impossible, a slow footstep echoed. Then another. Then another. Something had begun moving again. And this time, it sounded excited. Rachel refused to touch the card. For a moment, I thought it would be the end of it. Maybe the game needed participation. Maybe it only worked if we cooperated. Maybe if we had all refused, it would be fine. The card sat on the floor between us, waiting. Rachel crossed her arms and stepped backwards. "No." The words sounded stronger than she felt. I could see it in her face. The fear, the uncertainty, the growing realization we were trapped inside something none of us understood. "I'm not playing," she said. Nothing happened. A tiny spark of hope flickered inside me. Maybe that was it. Maybe we found a way out. The attic remained silent, and the card remained motionless. Rachel laughed nervously. "See?" And no one answered. The hope lasted exactly 5 seconds. Then every flashlight went out again. Darkness swallowed the room. This time it lasted longer. 10 seconds, maybe 15. Long enough for panic to begin to shape, enough for me to realize we were not alone. Something was moving in the darkness. Not above us, not outside, inside the attic. A slow shuffling sound, circling, carefully and patient. My pulse hammered in my ears. Nobody spoke. Nobody dared. The darkness felt occupied, like standing in a crowded room with a blindfold. The flashlight suddenly returned, and Rachel screamed. The card was now at her feet, directly between her shoes. She stumbled backwards so quickly she nearly fell. What the hell? The words exploded out of her, and no one answered, because we were all staring at the card. New writing covered the surface. Words that hadn't been there before. The player has been chosen. The attic bulb flickered. Once. Twice. And then started. Fresh ink appeared beneath the sentence, letter by letter, slowly enough for us to watch. Look through the window. Rachel stared. The color drained from her face. No, she said. And the card continued writing. Do not look away. A pause. And then one final line. When she waves, wave back. The room felt completely silent. I felt my stomach drop. Every window in the attic faced the woods behind the house. The same woods from my dream. The same woods where 3 people had disappeared in 1964. Rachel backed away from the card. Not a chance. Nobody could blame her, not even Emma. Especially not Emma. She hadn't spoken much since her completing her own task. Every now and then, her gaze drifted towards the corner of the attic, as though she could still hear a distant voice. Maybe don't do it, Tom said. Rachel looked grateful. Thank you. The cards changed immediately, and fresh ink spread across the paper. Failure results in forfeiture. The words lingered, and then another line appeared. Forfeiture results in replacement. What does that even mean? Tom whispered. Nobody knew. The game wasn't explaining itself. It never had. And yet somehow, the sentence felt worse than the direct threat. Replacement. The words settled heavy inside my chest. Rachel looked towards the window, and the attic seemed colder now. The shadows longer. Outside, evening had arrived without us noticing. The woods beyond the glass had become a wall of darkness. Nothing moved. Nothing visible anyways. Rachel swallowed, and then slowly approached the window. Every floorboard creaked beneath her weight. The rest of us stayed where we were, watching, waiting. She stopped several feet away, close enough to see outside, far enough to run if she needed to. At least, I think that was her plan. The card slid slightly across the floor. A tiny movement, barely noticeable, yet somehow unmistakable. Closer to the window. Rachel cursed under her breath and then took another step forward, and another, until she stood directly in front of the glass. Nothing happened. For nearly a minute, nothing happened. The woods remained still. The darkness remained empty. And Rachel let out a shaky laugh. "There's nobody out there," she said. The words had barely left her mouth when she froze. Every muscle in her body locked, and the laughter vanished. I felt my pulse stumble. "Rachel?" No response. "Rachel." Slowly, she raised one trembling hand, pointing towards the trees. I moved closer, not too close, but just enough to see. And at first I saw nothing. Then the darkness shifted. Not movement, shape. A figure stood among the trees. A woman, far back in the woods, motionless, watching the house. The distance should have hidden details, yet somehow I knew she was smiling. The certainty arrived instantly, cold and absolute. The woman stood perfectly still, one hand resting at her side, the other slowly lifting. Wave. A simple greeting. Not threatening. Nothing dramatic. Yet every instinct inside me screamed, "Run." Rachel's breath became ragged. "Oh God," she said, and the woman continued waving, patiently, waiting for a response. "Don't do it," Tom whispered. Rachel looked ready to cry. The card scraped across the floor, a harsh sound demanding attention, and the words darkened upon it. "Wave back." The attic groaned. Somewhere overhead another footstep, closer this time, much closer. Rachel squeezed her eyes shut and then lifted her shaking hand and waved. The woman immediately vanished. Not stepped away, not disappeared behind a tree. Gone. One moment she was there, and the next, she wasn't. The woods stood empty. Rachel staggered backwards. The card changed again. Task complete. A collective breath escaped the room. For several seconds, nobody spoke. And then Emma whispered, "She's here." Every head turned. Emma was staring towards the attic stairs, or where the stairs should have been. Her face had gone pale, terrifyingly pale. "Emma?" She pointed. Slowly, wordlessly. We followed her gaze and saw muddy footprints. Fresh footprints leading across the attic floor. Small footprints. Bare feet. Wet earth clung to each impression. The tracks began at the attic entrance and ended beside Rachel, as though someone had walked up behind her while she stood at the window. The smell hit us a moment later. Damp soil, rotting leaves, rain-soaked earth. The same scent that drifted from the box. The same scent Rachel noticed when she arrived. Only stronger now. Much stronger. Like someone had carried the forest inside. Tom took a step backwards, and then another. His voice emerged barely above a whisper. "Those weren't there before." Nobody answered, because we all knew he was right. The footprints were fresh. Fresh enough that tiny droplets of muddy water still glistened in the floorboards. Fresh enough that whatever made them couldn't have arrived long ago. A sound echoed from the far side of the attic, a soft creak, the kind that's made by shifting weight, and we all turned. Nothing stood there, yet the smell intensified. The attic felt crowded again, occupied. The same sensation I expected during the blackout, like invisible people stood just beyond sight, watching, listening, waiting. Then Emma suddenly gasped. Her eyes widened. No, the words escaped before she could stop it. What? I asked. She pointed towards the wall covered in warnings, the wall my grandmother and countless others had used to write their message. Only now, another sentence had appeared. Fresh, dark, still wet. Written across the wood in enormous letters. The handwriting wasn't my grandmother's. It wasn't handwriting I've ever seen. The letters looked wrong. Jagged. Uneven. Like something had learned to write by watching people do it. The message stretched from floor to ceiling. 3 of them are still here. Silence consumed the attic. A terrible silence. The kind that arrives just before something changes forever. And then, somewhere, deep within the house below us, a door slowly opened, and someone began climbing the stairs, one step at a time, toward the attic. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The sound came again. A slow creak from somewhere below. Then another. The unmistakable groan of weight settling onto wooden steps. Someone was climbing the staircase. Not the attic ladder. The staircase inside the house itself. 1 floor below us. Coming closer. 1 step. Pause. 1 step. Pause. Deliberate. Unhurried. As though whatever was climbing already knew we couldn't leave. The 4 of us stood frozen beneath the weak glow of the attic bulb, listening. The footsteps continued. The old house seemed to amplify every sound. Wood creaked. Nails groaned. Dust drifted from the rafters. Closer. 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 The thing in the stairs wasn't trying to be quiet. That was somehow worse. It wasn't sneaking. It wasn't hunting. It was approaching openly, like it had every right to be there. Tom finally whispered what all of us were thinking. There's someone in the house. The words sounded absurd, impossible, yet none of us argued because we could all hear it. A living, physical sound. Footsteps. Slow and steady, coming towards us. The card box sat open in the center of the attic, silent, waiting, almost expectant, as though the game itself was listening. The footsteps reached the 2nd floor, and the floorboard below us creaked loudly. And then another. The unseen visitor had entered the hallway. My hallway. The same hallway I'd walked every day since returning to the house. The same hallway where my grandmother's family photograph still hung on the walls. Something moved beneath us, slowly crossing towards the attic entrance. Rachel grabbed my arm, hard enough to hurt. I didn't pull away. Her fingers were trembling. "Call the police," she said, and I reached for my phone immediately. But no signal, not one bar. The screen displayed only one small gray message. No service. Tom checked his, same result. Emma checked hers, nothing. The realization settled over us like ice water. Every phone had worked perfectly an hour earlier, and now all four were dead to the outside world. The footsteps stopped, directly below us. The silence that followed felt endless, and then came a soft scraping sound. Wood against wood. The attic door opening. A gust of cold air swept upward through the opening, and the smell of damp earth filled the room, stronger than ever. Wet soil, dead leaves, ancient roots. The scent of a forest after rain. Something was standing at the bottom of the attic ladder, listening, waiting. None of us could see the opening from where we stood. Part of me desperately wanted to look, yet another part knew that I shouldn't. The same instinct that tells you not to look beneath your bed, not to glance towards a dark doorway, not to answer a voice calling your name from an empty room. The bulb on the attic flickered once, twice, 3 times, and then steadied. A voice drifted upward from below. Soft, familiar, impossible. "Sweetheart?" My blood turned to ice. The voice belonged to my grandmother, exactly as I remembered it. Gentle, warm, comforting. For one terrible moment, every rational thought disappeared. I nearly answered. Nearly. And then I remembered. My grandmother had been dead for 3 months. The voice came again. "Sweetheart?" Emma's eyes widened. She looked at me. She had to hear it too. All of them. Tom's face had gone completely white. Rachel looked ready to bolt. The voice sounded wrong now. Not because it wasn't convincing, because it was. Too convincing. Every word perfect. Every inflection perfect. As though something had studied her for years. Practiced and learned. The attic remained silent. The voice waited, then sighed, a disappointed sigh, and spoke again. This time the voice belonged to someone else. A man. Older. Tired. "Margaret?" The name echoed through the house. Margaret. My grandmother. The footsteps resumed, not climbing, descending, moving away, back down the hallway. The sound slowly faded, then disappeared entirely. Nobody spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, Tom whispered, "What was that?" But no one answered, because no one had an answer. The wall covering with warnings suddenly groaned. a deep vibration passing through the woods. Dust trickled from behind the boards, and new writing began to appear across the surface. The ink slowly spreads, like dark veins beneath skin. The message formed one letter at a time. They want to come home. Rachel took a step backwards. No, she said, and the word came out sharper this time. Angrier, more desperate. No, absolutely not. Fresh writing appeared beneath it. They never left. The temperature dropped, and every flashlight dimmed. And somewhere in the house below us, a door slammed. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Emma flinched. Tom cursed. I felt my pulse hammering in my throat. Then the box moved. Only an inch, but enough. Enough to remind us it was there. Enough to draw everyone's eyes towards it. And a third car slowly emerged, sliding forward. Paper scraping wood. The sound seemed impossibly loud. The cart stopped at the edge of the box, turned, and faced Tom. His name appeared immediately, black ink bleeding across the paper. Thomas. Tom stared. No, he said, and the card waited. His face tightened. Not a chance. The attic creaked. A shadow deepened, and the card remained patient. As though it already knew the outcome, fresh words appeared. Step into the hallway. Tom laughed nervously. Absolutely not, he said. And the card continued. Close the door. A pause, and then the final instruction appeared slowly and deliberately. Do not let the man see you. Silence. A horrible silence. I felt my stomach twist. The man. Not a man. The man. Specific. Knowing. Waiting. Tom looked at us, then at the card, and then back again. There's no way, he said, and nobody argued, because nobody wanted him to do it. Yet the card wasn't finished. The words shifted, darkened, expanded. The player has 2 minutes. The attic bulb dim, and the corners of the room thickened with shadows. The house itself seemed to settle around us, listening. Tom swallowed hard and asked, What happens if I don't? And the card answered immediately. He will find someone else. No one spoke. The meaning felt horribly clear. Not a punishment, a substitution. The same thing the game had done from the beginning. Someone always completed the task, one way or another. Tom looked towards the attic door opening, towards the hallway below, towards whatever had been walking through the house, using voices he stole from the dead. And then he looked back at us. Fear filled his eyes. Real fear. The kind that strips away every joke, every defense, every illusion of control. I don't think we should be here anymore, he said. Neither did I. Neither did any of us. But somewhere deep inside, another realization had begun to form. One far worse than the footsteps. Far worse than the voices. Far worse than the shadows. The game wasn't creating these things, it was introducing us to them. They had already been there, waiting in the house, waiting in the woods, waiting since 1964. And with every card drawn, we were learning exactly why my grandmother spent 60 years trying to keep this box hidden. Tom slowly reached down, picked up the card, and as soon as his fingers touched it, a loud knock entered from the attic door below. 3 slow taps. Patient, polite. The exact same knocks I heard outside my bedroom several nights before. Knock, knock, knock. Then a man's voice drifted upwards from the darkness. Calm, friendly, almost cheerful. Hello? The voice paused, then spoke again. I know you're up there. And something in the way he said it made me realize he wasn't looking for us. He already knew exactly where we were. The knock came again. 3 slow taps, measured and patient, as though the person standing beyond the attic door had all the time in the world. Tom stood frozen with the card in his hands. The words remained visible. Step into the hallway. Close the door. Do not let the man see you. Beneath them, fresh ink appeared. A countdown. 1 minute, 47 seconds. The number immediately began decreasing. Rachel swore under her breath. Emma looked like she might be sick, and I couldn't stop staring at the attic opening. The voice sounded so normal. That was the worst part. Not monstrous, not threatening, friendly. The kind of voice you'd trust, the kind of voice you'd answer. The knock came a 3rd time, and then silence. The man was waiting. Tom laughed nervously. The sound broke halfway through. I hate this, he said, and nobody disagreed, but the timer continued. 1 minute 29, 1 minute 28, 1 minute 27. Tom looked towards the opening, then towards us. I'll go. Rachel immediately shook her head. No. What choice do we have? He said. Neither of them had an answer, because the terrible truth sat between us. The game wasn't asking. It never had. Tom swallowed hard and then stepped towards the opening. Every floorboard seemed louder now. Every movement amplified. The attic watched, and the house listened. Something beyond the walls waited. When Tom reached the opening, he paused. His hand gripped the frame. The timer continued falling. 1 minute, 4. The attic felt colder with every second. The smell of damp earth lingered heavily in the air, and Tom looked back one final time, then climbed down. The darkness swallowed him. For several seconds, we only heard the creaking of the ladder, and then his voice drifted upward. I'm in the hallway. And the card immediately changed with fresh writing. Close the door. A moment later, we heard the attic door slam shut. The sound echoed through the house, and suddenly, we were alone, separated. Tom below, the rest of us above. The realization sent waves of panic through me. Whatever happened next, we couldn't help him. We couldn't even see him, only hear him. The card's countdown vanished and a new message appeared. The man is coming. Silence. Then footsteps. Not Tom's. Someone else. A slow rhythm drifting through the hallway below. One step. Pause. Another. Pause. The sound moved with impossible confidence, like someone walking through their own home. I felt every hair on my arm stand up. Tom? Emma called softly. No answer. The footsteps continued. Closer. Closer. And then Tom's voice finally returned. Barely a whisper. He's here. The words seemed to suck all the warmth out of the room. Nobody spoke. We simply listened. The footsteps stopped, and silence settled over the house. A terrible silence. The kind that feels alive. And then came a man's voice. The same calm voice we'd heard before, and the same friendly tone. So there you are. Rachel covered her mouth. Emma squeezed her eyes shut. I felt my heart pounding against my ribs. The voice sounded only a few feet away from Tom. Maybe less. I've been looking for you. A pause. Then a soft chuckle. I've been looking for all of you. The attic bulb flickered violently. The walls groaned, and suddenly every flashlight dimmed at once. The house didn't like hearing him speak, or perhaps it feared him. The man continued. Have you seen Margaret? My stomach twisted. Margaret, my grandmother. The name felt wrong coming from his mouth. Wrong in a way I couldn't explain. Below us, Tom remained silent, following the rule. Not letting the man see him. Not answering. The footsteps resumed. Slowly, methodically, moving through the hallway. Searching. The floor creaked. Closer, and then farther away, and then closer again. Like a predator circling through tall grass. The attic remained completely silent until Emma suddenly gasped. We turned towards her, and she was staring at the warning wall. New writing had appeared. Not one sentence. Several. Lines and lines of frantic handwriting spreading across the boards. Different styles. Different people. Different years. All emerging from the wood at once, as though invisible hands were writing desperately. One message caught my attention immediately. Don't answer him. Another appeared beneath it. He isn't real. And then a third written in trembling letters. He was never a player. My blood ran cold. The writing continued. More words emerging. More desperate warnings. Until finally one sentence stretched across the center of the wall, larger than the others. Darker. More urgent. He is the reason the game exists. The attic was silent. Even the footsteps below us seemed to stop. For a brief moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And then a crash echoed from the hallway. Something heavy hitting the floor. Tom shouted. Sounds exploded through the house. Fear, raw and immediate. The kind of screams that escape before you realize you're making it. Tom, someone screamed, but no answer. I rushed towards the opening and Rachel grabbed my arm. Wait. Another crash. The house shuddered. Dust rained from the rafters. Then came running footsteps. Fast, panicked. Tom. The attic door burst open below and the ladder shook violently, and Tom scrambled upward, never falling, never slipping. His face had gone white. Not pale, white. Like paper. Like bone. Like he'd seen something human beings weren't meant to see. The moment he reached the attic floor, he slammed the door shut and backed away from it. Breathing hard. Nobody spoke. We simply stared. Waiting. Eventually, Rachel whispered, "What happened?" Tom looked at us. His eyes seemed distant, unfocused, still trapped in whatever he witnessed. For several seconds he could not answer, and then finally he managed 3 words. "There are 2. Silence. What? Tom swallowed, hard. The man, his voice trembled. There are 2 of him. A chill swept through the room. The attic bulb flickered again. Tom continued. I hid in the hallway closet. His breath remained ragged. I could hear him walking outside. He closed his eyes, as though reliving it, and then I heard footsteps behind me. Nobody moved. Nobody dared. Tom's voice dropped lower. There was another closet. Pause. A terrible pause. And another version of him standing inside. The words hung in the air, heavy, impossible. He was smiling. Emma looked sick. Rachel stared at the floor, and I felt my pulse hammering. Tom laughed weakly. The sound bordered on hysteria. He told me not to let the other one find me. The attic groaned. The warning wall vibrated and fresh writing appeared. Only 4 words. Now there are 3. No sooner had the message appeared than something knocked from the other side of the attic door. 3 slow taps. Knock, knock, knock. The entire group froze. Then another knock answered from somewhere else in the house, far below. Knock, knock, knock. A third followed, from outside, beyond the attic window. Knock, knock, knock. The realization hit us all at once. 3 locations, 3 knocks, 3 versions. And somewhere, beyond the walls of the house, beyond the darkness gathering in the woods, something was multiplying, growing, learning. With every card drawn, with every rule obeyed, with every player that remained in the game. And for the first time since finding the box, box, I began to suspect that the missing people from 1964 had never truly vanished. Because if the warning wall was telling the truth, some of them might still be here. For a long time after the knocking stopped, nobody spoke. The attic seemed to be listening. That was the only way I can describe it. Every creak felt deliberate. Every shifting shadow seemed to pause when we looked directly at it. Outside, darkness pressed against the windows. The woods had vanished completely. Not hidden, gone. The grass reflected only the attic itself. 4 frightened faces, a wood box, and a room full of warnings left behind by people who had known exactly how this story ends. Tom sat against the far wall, still shaking from what he'd seen. Rachel paced, and Emma stared at the message covering the wood. And I found myself looking for my grandmother's handwriting. Among thousands of desperate warnings, her words appeared again and again. Smaller than the others. Neater. More controlled. Yet, somehow sadder. Most had written instructions. She had written apologies. I tried. I'm sorry. Don't trust the voices. And over again. I should have never opened that box. The sentence tightened something in my chest because until that moment, I'd been assuming that this game began in 1964. But what if it hadn't? What if my grandmother hadn't discovered it? What if someone had passed it to her? The thought arrived suddenly, like a piece of a puzzle snapping into place. The game had history, a long history, longer than any of us understood, and my gaze drifted back towards the box. The carving seemed darker now, deeper, almost wet. Roots twisted into the wood in impossible patterns. Not decorative, growing. The longer I stared, the more convinced I became they resembled tree roots. Ancient roots. Something buried beneath the earth. Something spreading. Look. Emma's voice broke the silence. She pointed towards the warning wall. A section near the bottom had begun to crack. Thin lines spread through the woods. Dust trickled down, and the crack widened. Slowly, deliberately, as though pressure was building from behind it. The 4 of us watched. No one dared to move closer. The wood groaned, and then the narrow section of wall shifted inward. A hidden door. The realization struck us all at once. My grandmother had hidden something. Not in the attic. Inside it. The small door swung open with a soft sigh, and cold air drifted outward, among with the familiar scent. Damp earth, dead leaves, rain-soaked woods. Rachel started. Tell me that's not another game room. Nobody laughed, because it wasn't. The space beyond looked more like a crawl space. Small, cramped, barely large enough for a person. A flashlight beamed revealed shelves, boxes, papers, dozens of them. For a moment, nobody moved. And then Emma stepped forward. Of course she did. Some people run for mysteries. Emma practically introduces herself to them, and the rest of us followed. The hidden room was no larger than a walk-in closet, yet it contained more answers than the rest of the house combined. Journals lined the shelves, stack after stack, leather-bound, dust-covered, carefully preserved. My grandmother's journals. The oldest dated 1965, 1 year after the disappearances. The newest was only 3 months old, written shortly before her death. A lifetime of records. A lifetime of fear. My hands trembled as I opened the first one. The pages cracked softly. The handwriting was unmistakable. Margaret Ellis, my grandmother. The first entry was dated November 2nd, 1964. 2 weeks after the night of her friends vanished. The words hit like a punch. They think Daniel, Evelyn, and Thomas disappeared into the woods. I wish that were true. Silence filled the room. Nobody spoke. I turned the page. The game did not take them all at once. That is what makes it worse. Another page. Thomas was the first. 3 days after he played, he forgot his mother's face. 2 days later, he forgot where he lived. And by the end of the week, he was no longer Thomas. A chill crawled up my spine. Rachel leaned in closer. What does that mean? I kept reading. He looked the same. He sounded the same. He smiled the same. But every day there was less of him inside. The room felt suddenly colder. The journal pages trembled in my hand. Daniel noticed first. He said Thomas felt rehearsed, like someone pretending to be Thomas. Nobody moved. The silence grew heavier. Page after page revealed the same horrifying story. The game hadn't killed them. Not immediately. It had changed them. Little by little. Memory by memory. Piece by piece. Until eventually, something else occupied the space they left behind. I turned another page and found a photograph tucked between the entries. The same 4 young people from the porch picture. Only this one had been taken later. Much later. My stomach dropped. 3 figures stood on the edge of the woods. Daniel, Evelyn, Thomas. Yet something felt terribly wrong. The eyes. All 3 stared directly at the camera, unblinking, expressionless, like mannequins wearing human skin. At the bottom of the photograph, my mother had written, "This was the last picture before they stopped pretending." Tom looked away first. "I don't like that," he said. Neither did I. I carefully set the photo aside and then opened another one, this one dated 1981. The entries had become frantic, messier, less control. One page had been underlined repeatedly. They're still here. Another, they do not age. And then, every few years, one of them returns to the house. They always have the same question. My pulse quickens. I flip through the pages and 3 words filled the next paper. Where is the box? The attic groaned. The sounds echoed around us as though the house itself disliked hearing this question. I kept reading. They are not Daniel. They are not Evelyn. They are not Thomas. But they wear their faces. The flashlight beam shook in my hand, and outside the room the house settled with a long creak. Something moved somewhere downstairs, and a floorboard groaned. We all heard it. Nobody mentioned it, because nobody wanted to. The journal continued. The man comes first. He always comes first. A chill swept through me. The man. Finally, an answer, or part of one. I turned the page, and the handwriting became uneven, almost fearful. He is older than the game. Older than the house. Older than the woods. The next sentence had been written 3 times, as though repeating might make it more believable, or one more truthful. He wants to be invited inside. The flashlight trembled. The air felt heavy, oppressed. I read the final line aloud, without meaning to. He cannot enter unless someone believes he belongs here. Silence followed. Then Tom slowly raised his head. His face had gone pale again. What did you just say? I looked at him. What? Tom swallowed. Hard. The version of him I saw in the closet. He said. The room seemed to hold its breath. Tom's voice dropped to a whisper. He kept asking if I lived here. A cold realization settled over us. The question wasn't random. It wasn't conversation. It was permission. The attic light flickered violently. Once, twice, and then darkness swallowed the room. Completely swallowed. Someone gasped. The journal fell. The hidden room vanished. The attic vanished. The house vanished. For several seconds there was nothing. Then the lights returned, and every journal on the shelves had fallen open to the exact same page. Hundreds of pages, hundreds of journals, all displaying the same sentence written in different years, different ink, different handwriting. The warning filled the room, a chorus of fear left behind by generations of players. Do not let him think he is welcome. The words seemed to vibrate in silence, and then from somewhere downstairs came the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. Slowly, deliberately, as though someone had finally been invited inside. And this time, the house did not stop them. The sound of the front door opening echoed through the house like a sigh. Not a crash, not a bang. Just quiet sound of a lock releasing, a door swinging inward, someone entering a place they believed they belonged to. The silence that followed felt worse, far worse, because now there was no barrier, no threshold, no line between outside and in. Whatever had been waiting beyond those woods had crossed into the house, and the house had allowed it. Nobody spoke. We stood inside the hidden room, surrounded by decades of journals, staring at its pages filled with warnings written by people who had already learned these lessons the hard way. Then something creaked downstairs. A floorboard. Slow. Measured. The sound carried through old structures. Not hidden. Not hurried. A person walking through the foyer. Learning the layout. Remembering it. My stomach tightened. Because somehow the footsteps didn't sound like an intruder. They sounded familiar. Like someone returning home after a long absence. Rachel whispered the question none of us wanted to ask. Did one of us invite him in? No one answered. The possibility hung heavy in the air. Terrible, but possible. The journals had been clear. He cannot enter unless someone believes he belongs here. Not welcomes him. Not summons him. Believes. The distinction mattered. And suddenly I remembered. The dream. The attic window glowing. The shape standing inside. Watching me. I had thought about it belonged there. For a moment in the dream, I accepted its presence completely. The memory sent a cold shiver through me. Had that been enough? Or had it been something else? Tom suddenly straightened, his eyes fixed on something behind me. "What's that?" he said, and I turned. One of the journals had fallen from the shelf. Unlike the others, it wasn't my grandmother's. The cover was different. Older. Far older. The leather had darkened with age. No name appeared on the front, only a symbol burned into the cover. A circle surrounded by roots. The same roots carved into the wooden box. I carefully opened it. The pages were brittle, ancient, the handwriting unfamiliar. The first entry wasn't dated. The ink hadn't faded too much to determine its age, yet one sentence remained legible. "We found him beneath the trees." A chill ran through me. I turned another page. He was alone. He asked us where his family had gone. We believed he was lost. We brought him home. My pulse quickened. No. The journal continued. That was our mistake. Thunder rumbled somewhere far away. The sound felt wrong. Too distant, but too deep. As though it came from beneath the earth instead of the sky. This entry stretched across several pages. A fragmented account written by someone whose fear had outlived reason. The details were difficult to follow, yet a pattern emerged. A village, a forest. A stranger discovered wandering among ancient trees. A man with no memory, no family, no past. The villagers took him in, fed him, sheltered him, believed he belonged. After that, people began changing, forgetting, replacing, vanishing. Not physically, but something worse. The writer's final sentence had been scratched so deep into the page that the pen nearly tore through the paper. He wears whatever shape makes you trust him. Silence filled the room. Emma slowly sat down. "I hate every part of this," she said, and nobody disagreed. Then a new sound echoed through the house. Footsteps. Not one, several. The realization arrived instantly. There were multiple people moving downstairs. Not running, walking, patiently, as though searching room by room. The sound drifted through the floorboards, The living room, the kitchen, the hallway. A growing network of footsteps spreading through the house. Rachel's face went white. There can't be that many. But there were. We could hear them. One set crossed the foyer, another moved through the dining room, and a third seemed to pause directly beneath us, listening. The attic groaned. The warning wall trembled, and fresh ink appeared. Not slow this time. The words arrived all at once. Bold, dark, and urgent. They know you are here. Tom laughed nervously. A brittle sound. Great, he said, and the writing continued. They always do. Another line appeared beneath it, and the handwriting changed. Different, smaller, familiar. My grandmother's. The house hides you until it can't. I stared. The sentence felt personal, like a message intended specifically for me. And then more words appeared, one letter at a time, as though someone were struggling to write them. Check the photograph. The room felt silent. The photograph, the one tucked inside the journal, the final picture of Daniel, Evelyn, and Thomas. I grabbed it immediately, and for a moment I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then I caught my breath. The photograph had changed. 3 figures still stood at the edge of the woods. But now, there were 4. A 4th shape stood farther back among the trees, almost hidden, watching. A figure I hadn't noticed before. Tall, thin, motionless. The face blurred, the details distorted, yet something about this silhouette felt faintly familiar. My pulse hammered. I looked closer and I realized why. The figure looked exactly like me. The photograph slipped through my fingers. No one spoke. No one moved. The image laid on the floor between us, the 4 of us staring down at it, at the impossible figure standing in the photograph taken decades before I was born. Then Emma whispered, "Turn it over." My hands shook as I picked it up. The back of the photograph contained handwriting, fresh, not faded, not old, as though written moments ago. The message consisted of a single sentence. "You've been in the game longer than you think." The attic bulb exploded. Glass rained from the ceiling. Darkness swallowed the room. Someone screamed. For a split second, the room vanished completely. The journals, the shelves, the walls, everything. And in that instant of darkness, I heard breathing. Not beside me, not downstairs, directly behind me, close enough to touch. A man's voice whispered softly into my ear. "So there you are." The lights returned. The room reappeared. The breathing vanished. But I wasn't the only one who had heard it. I knew that immediately, because every face in the room was staring past me. Not at me, past me. Towards the darkness behind my shoulder. Slowly, very slowly, I turned around. The hidden room stood empty, or at least it appeared empty. The shelves remained, the journals remained, the walls remained. Yet something had changed. One of the journals now sat open on a table that hadn't existed before. A single page waited. Fresh ink glistened across it. Words written only moments earlier. Words written in my grandmother's handwriting. The final entry. The last thing she ever recorded. The date at the top was 3 days before she died. I stepped closer, my pulse thundering. The message was painfully short. If you're reading this, he finally found you. I'm sorry. I tried to keep you out of the game. A pause, and then one final sentence. The last words my grandmother ever wrote. The words that made my blood run cold. He has been looking for our family for 62 years. Silence settled over the attic. A terrible, suffocating silence. Because suddenly, the game wasn't random. It wasn't chance. It wasn't bad luck. The box hadn't found me. The house hadn't found me. The game hadn't found me. But something else had. And somewhere below us, footsteps began to climb the stairs again. Not one set. Not 3. Not even 4. Dozens. Slowly ascending towards the attic, as though an entire crowd had finally arrived. The footsteps continued climbing, dozens of them. Slow, steady, relentless. The sound filled the walls of the house. Old wood groaned beneath unseen weight, and dust drifted from the rafters. The attic seemed to shrink around us. For the first time since finding the box, I stopped thinking about escaping. Somewhere deep inside, I understood. There was nowhere to run. The game had never been confined to the house. The house was only where it waited. The final journal laid open before me. My grandmother's words buried in my head. He has been looking for a family for 62 years. Rachel stood beside me. What does that mean? I don't know. At least not yet. But the answer was somewhere in these journals. It had to be. The footsteps reached the second floor, and the distant doors opened, and then another. The sound moved through the house like a spreading stain, room by room, closer, searching, remembering. Emma grabbed another journal from the shelf. Its pages fluttered open. A folded letter slipped free. Yellow, fragile, sealed with brittle wax. My grandmother's name appeared on the front. Margaret. The handwriting wasn't hers. Neither was the date. October 1964. 3 days after the game. I opened it carefully, and the paper cracked softly. Inside was a letter from Daniel, one of the missing players. One of the people everyone believed had disappeared. The room felt silent as I began to read. Margaret, if you're reading this, then I finally found enough of myself to write it. I don't know how much time I have. Every day I forget something else. A memory, a face, a name. Sometimes I look into the mirror and see someone standing behind my eyes, waiting, learning. The others are getting worse. Thomas smiles all the time now, even when nobody is speaking, even when he's asleep. Evelyn keeps asking where she is. She asks every hour, sometimes every minute. And then she forgets, she asks, "We weren't taken. That's the lie that people will believe. The truth is much worse. He's moving into us. Piece by piece, memory by memory. When there's nothing left, we'll wear us like coats. If I lose myself completely, promise me one thing. Don't let him have your family too. Burn the box, hide the rules, make people forget. Please. Before he learns your name." The letter ended there. No signature, no farewell, just desperation. The footsteps continued below us, nearer now, and the attic door shuddered softly. Something had touched it. A warning wall suddenly vibrated. Fresh writing appeared, fast and frantic. The words spread across the boards like cracks in ice. "He remembers you." My pulse stumbled. The sentence wasn't addressed to all of us. It felt personal, direct, targeted at me. And then another message appeared, written in my grandmother's familiar hand. "Read journal number 17. I searched the shelves. I found it and opened it. The entry was dated 1978. My grandmother was older by then, married, a mother. The handwriting remained steady, yet fear bled through every word. "He came to the house tonight." A chill swept through me. He wore Daniel's face. I kept reading. "My son answered the door." The room seemed to tilt. My son, my father. Daniel asked if he could come inside. My son almost said yes. But he saw Daniel's reflection in the window. The reflection was smiling. Daniel was not. Silence. The attic felt frozen. I turned the page, and I found the answer. The thing my grandmother had hidden 60 years. The truth she had never told anyone. He cannot take family unless he is invested by blood. The word struck like lightning. Blood. Family. Generations. That's why he kept returning. That's why he hadn't stopped. My grandmother hadn't escaped the game. She had delayed it, protected her children, protected her grandchildren, protected me. For as long as she could, the attic door suddenly rattled. Hard. A violent impact shook the frame. Rachel screamed. Tom stumbled backwards. Another impact followed. Then another. Something was trying to get inside. Not politely anymore. The house groaned in protest. Old wood strained. Nails screamed. The warning wall erupted in writing. Dozens of messages appearing simultaneously. Years of voices speaking together. A chorus of the trapped. End the game. Break the box. Don't let him cross. It has to be you. The final sentence appeared in my grandma's handwriting, larger this time than all the others. I'm so sorry. The attic door burst open. The impact echoed like thunder. Cold air flooded the room. The smell of damp earth became overwhelming. The figures began to climb the ladder, one after another. Daniel, Evelyn, Thomas, or what remained of them. Their faces looked human, almost, but not quite. Their smiles were too wide, their eyes too still, their movements slightly delayed. like puppets controlled by invisible strings. Behind them came another, dozens of them, people from different decades, different generations, all wearing borrowed faces, all climbing towards us. The attic bulb flickered violently, then steadily, and at the bottom of the ladder stood the man. For the first time, I saw him clearly. He looked ordinary, painfully ordinary. Middle-aged, dark coat, kind eyes, the sort of face you'd trust immediately, the sort of face you'd forget more months later. He smiled, not cruelly, not maliciously, sadly, as though he regretted what came next. "Hello." His voice filled the room. Soft, warm, human. "I've been looking for you." The attic felt silent. Even the figures climbing the ladder stopped moving, waiting. The man looked directly at me. "I knew your grandmother." A pause, a gentle smile. "She was difficult." Something in me snapped. Not courage, not bravery, understanding. All at once I understood what my grandmother had spent 60 years trying to teach me. The game wasn't the trap. The game was the lock. The rules weren't feeding him. They were containing him. Every completed task, every player, every cycle, a prison, a ritual, a cage repaired over and over. The moment nobody finishes the game, the cage broke and he walked free. The realization hit me with a crushing force. The final card. We had never reached it. The game remains unfinished, and the prison remains open. The man tilted his head. Perhaps he saw understanding in my eyes, because his smile faded, and he said, "You know now." I looked towards the wooden box, the roots carved into the surface seeming alive, twisting, growing, and the final card rested inside, face down, untouched. The last rule, the last choice. My grandmother had spent 60 years keeping the game from ending because she feared what happened next. But she also let me answer everything I needed. The trapped voices on the wall began writing one final message. Hundreds of hands, hundreds of years. One sentence. Finish it. The man took a step forward. The house shuddered. The attic darkened and the figures behind him smiled, watching, waiting. I reached into the box and my fingers closed around the final card. The paper felt warm, almost alive. Slowly, I turned it over. The room held its breath, and the card contained only 6 words. The last player closes the door. Silence. Then, understanding. Not a door, the door, the opening, the invitation, the path he spent centuries trying to cross. The man's expression had changed, and for the first time fear had appeared in his eyes. "No," the words emerged quietly, humanly. I smiled, just a little, and then I spoke the final words of the game. "I don't believe you belong here." The attic exploded with sound. The house screamed. The walls shook. Every journal flew open. Every warning blazed across the wood. The figures climbing the ladder froze. The man staggered backward. And for a moment, his face changed. Not once, hundreds of times. Different ages, different people, different centuries. Masks falling away. The thing beneath them was ancient, empty, hungry, and suddenly terrified. The roots caved into a box erupted across the attic floor. Wood cracked, light burst from the warning wall, and the trapped voices rose together. Thousands of whispers becoming one. The man reached towards me, desperate. Too late. The final rule had been completed. The door began to close. The figures dissolved first, then the shadows, then the endless faces he'd stolen. The attic filled with blinding light, and for the first time in 62 years, the game ended. I woke the following morning on the attic floor. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Birds sang outside. The house felt quiet, truly quiet. For the first time in my life, the warning wall stood blank. The hidden room was gone, and the journals had vanished. The box had become an ordinary piece of wood. Nothing more. My friends woke beside me, confused, exhausted, alive. None of us spoke much about that night afterwards. Some things are easier left alone. The house was eventually sold. The box was buried beneath the oak tree deep in the woods, and for years I convinced myself it was over. Most days I still believe that. Most days. But sometimes, usually just before dawn, I wake from dreams of rain and dark forests. And in those dreams I hear a knock. 3 slow taps. Patient. Polite. Waiting. As though someone on the other side of a very old door still hopes I'll change my mind. And every time I wake, I find myself listening, just for a moment, to make sure the door remains closed. The candle is burning low now, and the swamp has grown quiet. If you're still awake, there's always another story waiting for you here. Sleep well, and I'll be right